Concepts of the Chapter 5, the Bronze Age Near East, is that the first large urban civilizations on record occurred in southern Iraq, in the area called Sumer, the big plain between the Tigris and the Euphrates. But that regimes changed rapidly, partly because of the openness of the place. And so we see Sumer replaced by Acadia by 2200 BC, by Babylonia, the high point being 1750, by the Kassites and the Mitanni. And so the general tendency toward the formation of imperial dynasties was offset by countervailing tendencies of sudden political collapse and invasion by migrating peoples. The main way we go about looking at societies in this region is by languages. That's how they, where their languages, once we have written texts by 3500, what the languages come from. And we see that most of them came in from the outside. Sumerian itself is an agglutinative language, possibly connected to Central Asian languages like Turkish. We see Semitic languages, the main base language of this region. We see Indo-European languages, the Mitanni and the Hittites, for example, were Indo-European. And we see Elamite, which may be the oldest of it, and this is connected to Dravidian languages in South India. So languages are one way of getting at these early civilizations this way. When we can look at their social structure, what do we see? They tend to be very hierarchical. There tends to be a king and a royal complex. There tend to be an aristocracy that serves in the military and the court and are related to the king. There tends to be a city council in these city-states that is populated by the land-holding and property-holding elements, and there tends to be a priestly class which monitors and controls the temples and its estates as well. Beneath all of these, we see 85% of the population were farmers engaging in subsistence agricultural activities, and that the rest of the hierarchy, this 10%, took resources from the farmers. So the farming class sustained the upper classes. In terms of social structure, we see, again, royalty, we see aristocracy, we see property holding elements, we see farmers, and we see slavery at the base. And this is true of almost all the ancient civilizations that we'll be looking at. There is a very rigid class, I don't want to call it class, but social hierarchy. Women are separate. Women tend to be separate but parallel is how we look at it that way. When we look at women, what do we see? It really depends on her status. I mean, aristocratic and royal women have enormous leeway because of their status. So even though they can't serve in the army, they can't serve in the council, they nonetheless are useful in dynastic arrangements. They can be pawns, but within royal families, for example, a lot of it depends on personality dynamics. Strong women can assert their influence over weak-minded men, for example, and so it's very hard to characterize that. Generally what we see is, again, they were separate. Their job was the domestic place. They preserved and raised families and maintained domestic orders and created safe environments to raise families in. And if they behaved in a respectable manner, the law would support them. There is evidence in Hammurabi's Law Code, 1750 BC, that women could engage in divorce if they could demonstrate that their husbands were not treating them well and what have you. And so the status of women is kind of a sad thing to look at in antiquity, but it has its porosity. There are exceptions to every rule that we can see.